I want to talk about some stuff that is like a prelude to having spiritual experiences. And there's a lot of people, they kind of wonder, what happens, what is a spiritual experience, or what do people do to have such experiences. And uh, in fact, a lot of people have had spiritual experiences, but they kind of don't recognize it as such. Uh, and if you saw it or if you experienced it, you kind of have to kind of kick back and think about it, what just happened. And yeah, I wanna show you some examples of how it happens. Some people who are not prepared for it, they kind of freak out. Well, actually, if you read the ancient manuscripts, like about ancient Egyptians or megalithic era, you see that their society developed in parallel development. They not only developed technologically, they had many discoveries, but also it developed psychically or spiritually. And some of the stuff you read, like in ancient Egyptian religions or say Sumerian tablets, it talks about it's just like listening to a new age psychic. uh, it does talk about consciousness, it does talk about what happens after death, that there is a soul, and that the soul does not die, only the body perishes. In fact, I was listening to stuff about UFO that captured these aliens, and they they were studying them, and they saw that some of the aliens they were exposed to Earth's atmosphere and they got sick. Like there were three or four, and one or two got sick, and the doctors or the people that were watching them, they were human, they knew that this creature is going to die, and they communicated with them, saying, aren't you afraid you're going to die? Your body cannot deal with the terrestrial kind of bacteria or viruses. And they noticed that not only they were not afraid, but this concept that the body is a vehicle, and the soul goes on. Basically, it's the same stuff that you would hear from me or in religion, that there is a consciousness. This consciousness is similar to the universal consciousness or God, and then when people die, the soul just goes on. The body perishes. Even though these aliens, they had this fantastic technology, you see that their technological developments, it wasn't like a one-sided, like our civilization is totally based on Newtonian physics and the perception of the universe as a material world, whereas as we can see that the other creatures that they have evolved past that point, they kind of have a more spiritual outlook, and the way things would evolve from there. In fact, many people, their chakras open up, and they, for example, they become telepathic or very sensitive, or they have visions of the future, but they freak out because they never had such a view of the world. In fact, in the back of their mind, they have this structure of how the universe should be. It's like this material world, and there's nothing else. But then, as they get older, uh, these inner senses they kick in, they start working for one reason or another, or the chakras start working, and then they are confronted with these experiences. They have no idea what the hell just happened. This is because they were brought out very badly, very poorly. There was no spiritual aspect to their education, or their family didn't make any effort whatsoever. And when these things happen, it's a complete shocker. Like they think, oh my God, I'm losing my mind, this and that. Well, another way that many of the inner senses awaken and these spiritual experiences happen was something that was kind of I've been witness to this several times, but when people are abandoned, for example, they had done some experiences or some experiments with the miners, that they condemned some miners to go down in mine shaft and stay down there. I guess they have food and everything, but there was no contact with other humans, other people. So in this situation of forced solitude, then what happens is that this ego or the self that the society has constructed is like a ghost in the back of your mind, gradually loses its validity to the individual, and then this person is confronted with his or her real self, which is really a ghost, which is really the spirit, and then this is when they really freak out. A lot of people like report hallucinations, or they hear voices, uh, they see visions. A lot of shamans or mystics or Sufis, they do this on their own. They're not forced to go into a mind shaft. They practice solitude. For example, Prophet Muhammad used to go into a cave and meditate months at a time. I think Jesus had a place that he would go and ruminate or something like that. I have There is some kind of vague mentions in the Bible, New Testament. It's surprising how much he's just roaming around in the country unaccompanied. That's a form of solitude. Anyhow, well, I'm no stranger to being in the can, and I've been there a couple of times, or at least once, and then in the can, when the inmates they fight or they hurt each other. Sometimes they do it. Then the guard will come in and grab them, both of the parties, regardless of who's the guilty, because they're already in jail, and they take him and put him in the solitary. And a lot of people, they really hate the solitary, because they are they're just thrown in there, and they're abandoned to their self, which is their higher self. And boy, oh boy, that's not a very pleasant experience to them, because they spend all their life living with the false self that they have constructed. But the Sufi master said that no one can live in a house where a corpse is rotting away, because all the culture and all the social self that's constructed is not real, and all the stuff that it says, they're a lie. It's not something that the soul would dictate. Another way that this inner self awakens, or one realizes that he or she is nothing but this inner self, is when there is a trauma, there is a lot of trauma or near death, and when the social self or the ego loses its validity, and people fall back and to this real self, and for example, a lot of people pray to God or Jesus, or this is the same thing as falling back into this original self. Well, there is a verse in Quran. It goes like this: "Amman yujibu mustarra iza du'a wa yakshifu su." Means who is the person that you turn to when everything else has just fallen apart? Who is the person that heals you and brings you back? This is means that it's really your consciousness or your soul that finds those miraculous solutions, or things that you never thought of that you could do, and resolve that. Well, when a person practices solitude for a long time, then what comes next, or what is often concurrent with this solitude, if it's not forced by circumstances on her or him, is the realization of a complete poverty. Poverty, not in the sense of material poverty, but in the sense of realizing that a lot of the stuff that makes you happy or is important, it has nothing to do with the outside world, or what the society is doing, or what the circumstances are. Almost all the stuff that matters happens in your own soul, and this is realizing your own poverty, and then the next stage would be that the universal consciousness comes in, and or in Christianity they say that like when the Lord comes in, when you realize that consciousness is all that matters, everything else is just a decoration, then that's the stage of poverty, and then it leads to enlightenment, which you commune with this universal consciousness. And there are many signposts as in this path, but I am grateful that God gave me such experiences, and I am able to recount them. This is a form of riches that I possess. There is another prayer in Islamic circles. It says, Allahum aj'al ghanaya fi nafsi. God, put my riches in my soul, wal yaqinu fi qalbi, and your faith in my heart. So these are like the stages of this development of how it happens, uh, and if it's now forced by someone forcing themselves into this, but it happens naturally, is very sweet and beautiful. But if it's forced, somebody ends up in the bottom of a mine shaft, or in a solitary confinement, then and they don't understand what just happened, then it's kind of miserable. Well, my stuff is research. I bet you can hardly find any place on the internet that have this stuff. And please subscribe, and don't be shy. Leave your comments. Thank you very much.